The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Afghan mountains as Commander Sarah Mitchell adjusted her scope for the 13th time. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders like the heavy tactical vest she wore, each breath creating small puffs of vapor in the thin mountain air. Around her, the 12 finest military snipers from various elite units maintained their positions, their faces etched with frustration and disbelief. The target seemed impossible. A terrorist leader named Hassan al-Rashid had positioned himself on a narrow ledge exactly 4,000 meters away, taunting coalition forces from what he believed was an untouchable distance. Intelligence reports indicated he was planning to execute 3 captured humanitarian workers at sunset, broadcasting the horrific act to the world. The message was clear. Even the world's most elite marksmen couldn't reach him. Sarah had watched each of her fellow snipers take their shots throughout the morning. Master Sergeant Rodriguez from Delta Force, whose legendary accuracy had earned him the nickname Eagle Eye, had come within inches of the target. Staff Sergeant Thompson from the British SAS, holder of multiple long-range shooting records, had seen his bullet drift just wide in the unpredictable mountain winds. One by one, the most skilled shooters from American, British, Canadian, and Australian Special Forces had failed to make the shot that could save 3 innocent lives. The wind patterns at this elevation were unlike anything most of them had encountered. The air was thin, creating unusual bullet trajectories, and the thermal currents rising from the valley below created invisible barriers that sent even perfectly aimed shots astray. The mathematical calculations required were beyond complex, requiring real-time adjustments for temperature, humidity, wind speed at multiple elevations, and the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation. Sarah remained silent throughout the morning, observing each attempt with the methodical patience that had defined her 12-year career as a Navy SEAL. While her colleagues focused intensely on their equipment and calculations, she seemed to be studying something else entirely. Her eyes moved constantly between the target, the landscape, and the sky, as if reading a story written in the elements themselves. The other snipers knew little about Sarah beyond her reputation. She had earned her place among them through a series of impossible shots during classified operations, but she rarely spoke about her achievements. Her personnel file was heavily redacted, containing only hints of missions in places most people couldn't pronounce. What they didn't know was that she had never missed a shot when lives were on the line, a record that seemed almost supernatural among her peers. As the afternoon wore on, tension mounted within the command post. General Patterson paced behind the snipers, his radio crackling with updates from intelligence teams monitoring the target's position. The terrorist leader had been seen preparing what appeared to be execution equipment, and thermal imaging confirmed the presence of 3 figures bound near the edge of the cliff. Tom was running short. "Mitchell," the general finally said, his voice heavy with desperation. "I know this isn't your specialty, but we're out of options here. The shot is beyond what any of our dedicated marksmen can achieve." Sarah looked up from her position where she had been lying motionless for the past hour, her rifle trained on the distant target. The other snipers turned to watch her, some with skepticism, others with curiosity. She was known as an assault specialist, someone who excelled in close-quarters combat and tactical operations rather than long-range precision shooting. "I've got this," she said simply, her voice barely above a whisper. The confidence in those 3 words was startling. While the other snipers had spent the morning discussing wind calculations and trajectory mathematics, Sarah's quiet certainty seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. She moved with deliberate slowness, making minute adjustments to her rifle's position while her breathing became so controlled it was almost imperceptible. Rodriguez moved closer, intrigued by her approach. "What's your read on the wind patterns?" he asked, expecting to hear the technical analysis that had consumed their morning discussions. Sarah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she continued her methodical preparation, checking and rechecking equipment that had already been perfectly calibrated. When she finally spoke, her words surprised everyone within hearing distance. "The wind isn't the enemy," she said softly. "It's trying to show us the path." Thompson from the SAS raised an eyebrow at this seemingly mystical approach to precision shooting. "Come again?" "The thermals have been throwing off every shot all morning." Sarah finally turned to look at her fellow marksman, her eyes holding a depth of understanding that seemed at odds with the technical nature of their challenge. "You've all been fighting the mountain," she explained. "Calculating against it, compensating for it, trying to overcome it. But this place has its own rhythm, its own language. You have to learn to speak it." The explanation sounded almost philosophical, but nobody could argue with Sarah's track record. General Patterson checked his watch nervously, knowing that every minute brought them closer to the sunset deadline. The pressure was mounting not just on Sarah, but on everyone present. 3 innocent lives hung in the balance, and conventional wisdom suggested that the shot was simply impossible. Sarah resumed her position, settling into a stance that looked deceptively relaxed compared to the rigid precision of her colleagues' postures. She began what appeared to be a meditation, her eyes half closed as she seemed to listen to something only she could hear. The wind gusted across the mountainside, and instead of cursing it like the others had done all morning, she appeared to welcome it. "She's lost her mind," whispered one of the Canadian snipers to his partner. "No way anyone makes this shot by talking to the weather." But Rodriguez had been watching more carefully. He noticed that Sarah's breathing had synchronized with the wind patterns, her body swaying almost imperceptibly with the mountain's natural rhythm. Whatever technique she was using, it was unlike anything taught in conventional sniper schools. Minutes passed in tense silence. Sarah's finger rested lightly on the trigger, but she made no move to fire. The afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the mountains in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, thermal imaging confirmed that the terrorist leader was preparing for his planned execution, using the approaching sunset as his dramatic backdrop. Sarah's eyes suddenly opened fully, and her entire demeanor shifted. The relaxed, almost meditative state transformed into intense focus, but it wasn't the rigid concentration the others had displayed. Instead, it seemed like she had become part of the mountain itself, an extension of the natural forces around her. "Range, for 1,000 meters," she whispered to her spotter, though everyone knew the distance by heart. "Wind, variable, thermal activity, significant. Target is mobile but predictable." Her spotter, a young Marine named Collins who had worked with Sarah on previous operations, simply nodded. He had learned not to question her methods, having seen her accomplish things that defied standard military doctrine. His job was to provide confirmation and support, not to understand the almost supernatural intuition that guided her shots. The rifle in Sarah's hands was a custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum, modified with precision components that had been fine-tuned over years of use. Unlike the high-tech scopes and computerized systems that some of her colleagues favored, her setup was relatively simple, relying more on the shooter's skill than electronic assistance. She believed that too much technology could interfere with the natural connection between marksman and target. As the sun continued its descent, painting the distant cliff face in dramatic lighting, Sarah made her final preparations. Her breathing slowed to an almost imperceptible rhythm, and her heart rate dropped to levels that seemed impossible under such intense pressure. The other snipers watched in fascination as she seemed to enter a state that bordered on the supernatural. "Target acquired," she whispered, her voice so quiet that only Collins could hear her. Through his spotting scope, he could see the terrorist leader moving into position for his planned execution, the 3 bound hostages visible as heat signatures on thermal imaging. Sarah's finger began to apply pressure to the trigger, but still she waited. The wind gusted across the mountainside, carrying with it the scents of pine and stone, the sounds of distant valleys, and the whispered secrets of a landscape that had witnessed countless conflicts throughout history. To Sarah, it was all information, all part of the complex equation that would determine whether 3 innocent people lived or died. The moment came without warning. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Sarah's rifle fired with a sound that echoed across the mountains like thunder. The muzzle flash illuminated her face for a fraction of a second, revealing an expression of absolute certainty. The bullet began its journey across 4,000 meters of impossible terrain, carrying with it the hopes of everyone watching and the lives of 3 people who didn't even know they were about to be saved. As the shot rang out, Sarah remained perfectly still, her eyes still pressed to the scope, watching the bullet's path through the crystalline mountain air. Around her, the other snipers held their breath, waiting for confirmation of what they all suspected might be another miss. The distance was simply too great, the conditions too challenging, the shot too impossible for even the most skilled marksman. But Sarah's expression never wavered. As the bullet traveled its long arc through space and time, she already knew what the others would soon discover. The bullet's journey across 4,000 meters of mountain air took nearly 6 seconds, an eternity in the world of precision shooting. During those moments, Sarah remained motionless behind her rifle, her breathing so controlled it seemed she had become one with the weapon itself. The other snipers watched through their spotting scopes, expecting to see another missed shot add to the morning's growing list of failures. Collins, Sarah's spotter, kept his scope trained on the target zone, his hands steady despite the enormous pressure of the moment. Through the heat shimmer and atmospheric distortion, he could see the terrorist leader positioning himself for what would be a globally broadcast execution. The 3 hostages, bound and helpless, were barely visible as shadowy figures against the rocky cliff face. Then, in an instant that seemed to stretch beyond normal time, everything changed. Collins saw the impact through his scope, a small puff of dust and debris exactly where Hassan al-Rashid had been standing. The terrorist leader's body crumpled and disappeared from view, leaving only empty space where moments before he had been taunting the world's most elite military forces. "Target down," Collins whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Clean kill shot at 4,000 meters." The confirmation rippled through the observation post like an electric shock. Rodriguez grabbed his own spotting scope to verify the impossible shot, while Thompson from the SAS shook his head in disbelief. General Patterson immediately radioed for confirmation from the forward observation teams positioned closer to the target area. "Tango down. Repeat, primary target is eliminated," came the crackling response from the advance team. "Hostages appear unharmed and are being secured by rescue teams moving in from the north approach." Sarah finally lifted her head from the rifle scope, her expression calm and focused as if she had just completed a routine training exercise rather than accomplished what many would consider the most difficult shot in modern military history. She began the methodical process of safing her weapon while the celebration erupted around her. The other snipers crowded around her position, their earlier skepticism transformed into amazement and professional curiosity. Rodriguez was the first to speak, his voice filled with genuine respect. "How did you read those wind conditions? I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen thermals that unpredictable. My computer models showed the shot was impossible." Sarah finished securing her rifle before responding. "Computers can calculate atmospheric conditions, but they can't feel the mountain's breath," she said simply. "Every piece of terrain has its own personality, its own way of moving air and light. You have to learn to listen to it." Thompson leaned forward, his analytical mind struggling to understand what he had witnessed. But the mathematics of the shot, the bullet drop alone at that distance, combined with the wind deflection and the Coriolis effect, how did you compensate for variables that kept changing every few seconds? Sarah stood up slowly, stretching muscles that had been locked in position for hours. Around them, the rescue operation was proceeding smoothly, with helicopters moving in to extract the freed hostages. The mission that had seemed impossible just minutes before was now being hailed as a textbook example of precision warfare. "The variables weren't changing randomly," Sarah explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing hard-won wisdom. "They were following a pattern, like a song that repeats every few measures. The mountain was telling me when to shoot, not the other way around." General Patterson approached their group, his face showing a mixture of relief and amazement. Behind him, intelligence officers were already preparing reports that would analyze the shot for years to come. The implications went far beyond the immediate tactical success. A 4,000-meter precision kill shot was entering territory that redefined the possible limits of human marksmanship. "Mitchell, I need to understand what just happened here," the general said. "We had 12 of the world's best snipers attempt this shot, using the most advanced equipment and calculation methods available. You're telling me you succeeded by listening to the mountain?" Sarah considered her response carefully, aware that her explanation would be scrutinized by military analysts and training specialists. The techniques she had used weren't part of any official curriculum, having been developed through years of unconventional experience and an intuitive understanding of natural forces that couldn't easily be taught. Sir, conventional sniper training focuses on controlling variables and calculating precise solutions to ballistic problems, she began. But, at extreme distances like this one, there are too many variables to control or calculate in real time. The atmosphere becomes a living system that you have to work with rather than against. Rodriguez nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the philosophical difference in approaches. So instead of fighting the conditions, you were using them? Exactly, Sarah confirmed. The thermal currents rising from the valley weren't obstacles to overcome. They were creating a corridor, a pathway that the bullet could follow if I timed the shot correctly. The wind wasn't pushing against my round. It was guiding it toward the target. The explanation sounded almost mystical, but the results spoke for themselves. Collins, who had worked with Sarah on multiple operations, added his perspective to the discussion. I've spotted for her before, he said. She doesn't just calculate shots. She seems to feel them. It's like she becomes part of the environment instead of fighting against it. I've seen her make impossible shots in urban environments, dense jungle, and desert conditions using the same approach. Thompson from the SAS was taking notes, trying to document techniques that might be incorporated into future training programs. Can this method be taught to other marksmen? Is there a systematic approach to developing this kind of environmental awareness? Sarah considered the question while watching the distant helicopters complete the hostage extraction. The 3 humanitarian workers were safe, alive because of a shot that had defied conventional wisdom and mathematical probability. Yet she knew that what she had accomplished couldn't simply be reduced to a training manual or technical procedure. The foundation is understanding that you're not separate from the environment you're shooting in, she finally replied. Most snipers are taught to impose their will on the target through superior equipment and calculation. But, at extreme distances, you have to become part of the natural system. You have to let the environment help you instead of fighting it. The Canadian sniper who had earlier questioned Sarah's methods approached with obvious embarrassment. I owe you an apology, he said. When you started talking about speaking to the wind, I thought you'd lost focus. I've never seen anything like what you just accomplished. Sarah accepted the apology with grace, understanding that her methods challenged everything these elite marksmen had been trained to believe. No apology necessary, she said. What I do isn't better or worse than conventional techniques. It's just different. And, in this specific situation, it was what the mission required. As the afternoon continued, word of the impossible shot spread through military communications networks around the world. The 4,000-meter kill shot was already being analyzed by ballistics experts and military historians, who were struggling to understand how such a feat had been accomplished under the challenging conditions present that day. But, for Sarah, the technical achievement was secondary to the successful outcome. 3 innocent people were alive and safe, a dangerous terrorist leader had been eliminated, and a major propaganda victory had been prevented. The shot itself was simply the tool that had made those results possible. General Patterson pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation as the other snipers began packing their equipment. The official debriefing would come later, but he needed to understand what he had witnessed for his immediate reports to higher command. Mitchell, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I've never seen anything comparable to what you just did, he said quietly. I need to know if this was exceptional circumstances or if you can reliably perform at this level. Sarah met his gaze directly, understanding the implications of her answer. Sir, every shot is different because every environment is unique. I can't guarantee that I could repeat exactly what happened today because the conditions will never be exactly the same again. But, yes, I can work with extreme distance targets when conventional methods aren't sufficient. The general nodded, already considering how to incorporate this capability into future mission planning. I want you to know that what you accomplished today will save more lives than just those 3 hostages. The intelligence value alone of eliminating al-Rashid will prevent dozens of planned attacks. As the sun began to set over the Afghan mountains, painting the peaks in shades of purple and gold, Sarah reflected on the day's events. The shot that had taken 6 seconds to reach its target had actually been years in the making, the result of countless hours of training, meditation, and developing an almost supernatural connection with the natural world. The other snipers continued to discuss the technical aspects of her achievement, but Sarah had already moved on mentally to the next challenge, the next mission where lives might depend on her unique abilities. She had learned long ago that dwelling on past successes could interfere with future performance. Collins finished packing their equipment while Sarah cleaned her rifle one final time. The weapon had performed flawlessly, but proper maintenance was a ritual she never skipped regardless of circumstances. In her world, equipment failure wasn't just disappointing, it was potentially fatal. "What's next?" Collins asked as they prepared to leave the observation post. Sarah looked out across the mountains one last time, feeling the wind that had guided her bullet to its target. In the distance, she could see the lights of the helicopters carrying the rescued hostages to safety. Their mission accomplished through a combination of skill, intuition, and the mysterious partnership between human precision and natural forces. "Whatever they need us to do," she replied simply, shouldering her pack and beginning the long walk back to base camp. Behind them, the mountains settled into evening quiet, keeping its secrets while new legends were born from the impossible becoming possible. 3 months after the impossible shot that had saved 3 lives and eliminated one of the world's most wanted terrorists, Sarah Mitchell found herself in a sterile conference room deep within the Pentagon. The walls were lined with monitors displaying tactical data, satellite imagery, and classified documents that painted a disturbing picture of evolving global threats. Around the polished table sat representatives from every major military and intelligence organization, their faces grave with the weight of information they were about to share. General Patterson, who had witnessed Sarah's legendary marksmanship firsthand, stood at the head of the table. The events in Afghanistan had elevated him to a position of greater influence within the Department of Defense, largely due to his recognition of unconventional tactics and their potential applications in modern warfare. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear is classified at the highest levels," the general began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the impossible become routine. 6 weeks ago, our intelligence networks identified a new threat unlike anything we've encountered before. The individual responsible has been designated Alpha 7, and his capabilities challenge everything we thought we knew about long-range assassination. The main screen flickered to life, displaying satellite footage of what appeared to be a bustling marketplace in an unnamed Middle Eastern city. The timestamp showed the recording was from the previous month, and the image quality suggested it had been captured from an extremely high-altitude surveillance platform. Sarah watched with professional interest as the footage began to play. The marketplace scene looked entirely normal. Vendors selling produce, children playing between the stalls, and the usual chaos of urban commerce in a region where life continued despite ongoing conflicts. Nothing in the image suggested the tragedy that was about to unfold. "Watch Sector 7, Patterson directed, highlighting a portion of the screen where a prominent local leader was addressing a small crowd of supporters. The man was a known moderate voice in regional politics, someone who had been working toward peaceful resolution of long-standing ethnic conflicts. The footage continued for several minutes, showing the political figure speaking passionately to his audience while market activity continued around him. Security personnel were visible in the background, maintaining a protective perimeter that followed standard protocols for public appearances by high-value targets. Then, without warning, the political leader collapsed. The camera angle was too distant to show details, but the immediate response of his security team and the panic that spread through the crowd clearly indicated a fatal attack. Within seconds, the marketplace erupted into chaos as people fled in all directions. Time of death was confirmed at 14:37 local time. Patterson continued. Initial investigation suggested a heart attack or similar medical emergency. However, the autopsy revealed something extraordinary. The screen switched to medical imagery that Sarah recognized as high-resolution surgical photography. Despite her extensive military experience, the clinical precision of what she was seeing was disturbing. The deceased political leader's body showed evidence of a projectile wound that challenged conventional understanding of ballistic trauma. The victim was struck by a projectile traveling at extremely high velocity, Patterson explained. But here's where it gets interesting. The entry wound suggests a shot fired from approximately 6,000 meters away. Ladies and gentlemen, someone made a precision kill shot at a distance that our best analysis suggests should be physically impossible. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The technical challenge was staggering, representing an advancement in long-range marksmanship that pushed far beyond even her own legendary capabilities. 6,000 meters was a distance that entered the realm of artillery rather than precision shooting, yet the evidence clearly showed a single, perfectly placed round. How was the range determined? Asked Colonel Harrison from Army Intelligence, his voice reflecting the skepticism that everyone in the room was feeling. Patterson nodded to a technical analyst who took over the presentation. Ballistic analysis of the projectile fragments recovered from the scene, combined with wound pattern analysis and atmospheric modeling, all point to the same conclusion. The shot originated from a position approximately 6 kilometers from the target location. The analyst brought up a detailed topographical map showing the marketplace and the surrounding terrain. A red circle marked the calculated firing position, located on a mountainous ridge that provided clear line of sight to the target area despite the enormous distance involved. Reconnaissance teams confirmed evidence of recent activity at the calculated firing position, the analyst continued. Shell casings, disturbed earth, and equipment marks suggest a single shooter using a highly advanced rifle system. However, by the time our teams reached the location, the shooter had vanished without leaving any identifying evidence. Sarah studied the tactical display with growing concern. The implications of what she was seeing extended far beyond the immediate tragedy of a political assassination. If someone had developed the capability to make precision kills at 6,000-meter distances, it represented a paradigm shift in the nature of warfare itself. Has Alpha 7 struck again since this incident? Asked Admiral Chun from Naval Intelligence. Patterson's expression darkened. 3 more times. Each shot has been at progressively longer distances, as if someone is deliberately demonstrating increasing capability. The most recent assassination was confirmed at 7,500 meters. Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing an adversary whose skills exceed anything in our current tactical doctrine. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Traditional security protocols were designed around threats that operated within known parameters. Protection details, secure perimeters, and threat assessment procedures all assumed that hostile fire would come from distances measured in hundreds of meters, not kilometers. Sarah finally spoke, her voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere. Has there been any pattern analysis of the targets? Any connection between the victims beyond their vulnerability to long-range attack? Excellent question, Patterson replied, clearly pleased with Sarah's analytical approach. All 4 victims were moderate political leaders working toward peaceful resolution of regional conflicts. Each had been making progress in reducing tensions between opposing factions. Someone appears to be systematically eliminating voices of reason and moderation. The strategic implications were devastating. By targeting peacemakers and moderate voices, Alpha 7 was effectively pushing various regional conflicts toward escalation and violence. The psychological impact of the impossible shots was almost as significant as the tactical results, creating an atmosphere of fear and paranoia among political leaders worldwide. What's our response plan? Asked General Rodriguez from Special Operations Command. How do we protect high-value targets from a threat that can strike from distances we can't effectively monitor or counter? Patterson looked directly at Sarah before responding. That's where Commander Mitchell comes in. Based on her unprecedented success with long-range precision shooting, we believe she may be our best hope for understanding and ultimately countering this threat. Sarah felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders once again. The challenge of matching Alpha 7's capabilities would require pushing her own skills into uncharted territory, developing techniques, and understanding that went beyond even her unconventional methods. Sir, I appreciate the confidence, she replied carefully. But the distances we're discussing are beyond anything I've attempted. 7,000 meters isn't just technically challenging. It's operating in atmospheric conditions that fundamentally change how projectiles behave. We understand the difficulties, Patterson acknowledged. That's why we're prepared to provide you with resources and support unlike anything previously allocated to a single operator mission. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has been developing experimental long-range shooting systems specifically for this threat. The presentation shifted to display technical specifications for equipment that push the boundaries of current technology. Advanced optics systems, experimental projectiles, and Rifle platforms that incorporated computerized targeting assistance represented the cutting edge of military engineering. But Sarah's experience had taught her that technology alone wouldn't solve this challenge. The kind of shooting that Alpha 7 was demonstrating required something beyond mechanical precision and computational power. It demanded the same intuitive understanding of natural forces that she had used in Afghanistan, but elevated to levels that she had never attempted. "I'll need to understand everything we know about Alpha 7's methods," she said. "Equipment analysis, environmental conditions during each shot, any behavioral patterns we've identified. If I'm going to match these capabilities, I need to think like this person thinks." Colonel Harrison leaned forward with concern. "Commander, are you suggesting that Alpha 7 might be using unconventional shooting methods similar to your own techniques?" Sarah considered the question carefully, recognizing its implications. If Alpha 7 had somehow developed or discovered the kind of environmental integration she practiced, but elevated it to distances she had never attempted, it would explain the seemingly impossible achievements. "It's possible," she admitted. "The conventional mathematical models for long-range shooting break down completely at these distances. Anyone making shots like this would have to be working with principles that go beyond standard ballistic calculations." The meeting continued for another hour, with intelligence analysts sharing additional details about Alpha 7's activities and the growing destabilization occurring in regions where the mysterious sniper had struck. Each new piece of information painted a picture of an adversary whose capabilities challenged fundamental assumptions about the limits of human marksmanship. As the briefing concluded, Sarah found herself facing a mission unlike any she had previously undertaken. The challenge wasn't just technical, it was philosophical and psychological. To defeat Alpha 7, she would have to push her own abilities into territory that she wasn't certain was achievable, even with her unconventional methods. General Patterson approached her as the other attendees filed out of the conference room. "Sarah, I want you to know that this mission is entirely voluntary. What we're asking you to attempt has never been done before, and the risks are significant." Sarah looked at the tactical displays, still showing the locations where Alpha 7 had struck. For moderate leaders were dead, regional conflicts were escalating, and an unknown adversary was demonstrating capabilities that challenged the basic assumptions of modern warfare. The implications of inaction were clear. "When do we start?" she asked simply. Patterson smiled with relief and admiration. "Your training begins tomorrow at a classified facility in Nevada. You'll have access to the most advanced long-range shooting technology ever developed, along with a team of specialists who understand what you accomplished in Afghanistan. Your mission: learn to make shots at distances that redefine what's possible. Then, use those skills to stop Alpha 7 before more lives are lost." As Sarah left the Pentagon that evening, she understood that she was about to embark on a journey that would test not only her marksmanship skills, but her understanding of the fundamental relationship between human capability and natural forces. Somewhere in the world, an unknown adversary was pushing the boundaries of what seemed physically possible. Her job was to push even further. 6 weeks of intensive training in the Nevada desert had transformed Sarah's understanding of long-range marksmanship beyond anything she had previously imagined possible. The classified facility, hidden deep in the mountains north of Las Vegas, represented the pinnacle of military research into extreme distance shooting. Here, surrounded by some of the world's most advanced ballistics experts and equipped with experimental technology that pushed the boundaries of physics, she had been preparing for a confrontation that would determine the fate of regional stability across multiple continents. The breakthrough had come during her 4th week of training, when she successfully completed a 6,500-meter shot against a stationary target under controlled conditions. The achievement required integration of her intuitive environmental awareness with sophisticated computer modeling systems that could predict atmospheric conditions with unprecedented accuracy. But, even more importantly, it proved that human marksmanship could be extended into distances previously thought impossible. Now, as she lay concealed among the rocks of a Syrian mountainside, Sarah faced the ultimate test of those newly developed capabilities. Intelligence reports had confirmed that Alpha 7 would attempt another assassination today, targeting a peace negotiator whose success could prevent a regional war that threatened to destabilize the entire Middle East. The mysterious sniper's previous attacks had followed a predictable pattern, and, for the first time, coalition forces knew where and when the next shot would come. Sarah's position had been carefully selected after days of analysis by meteorologists, ballistics experts, and terrain specialists. She was positioned exactly 7,200 meters from Alpha 7's calculated firing position, a distance that represented the absolute limit of what her enhanced training had made possible. Between her and the target lay a complex landscape of valleys, ridges, and thermal currents that would challenge every skill she had developed. The rifle in her hands was unlike anything that had existed 6 months earlier. Designated the XM-2500 Advanced Long-Range System, it incorporated experimental materials, computerized targeting assistance, and projectiles designed specifically for extreme-distance precision shooting. Yet despite its technological sophistication, the weapon's success would ultimately depend on Sarah's ability to merge advanced calculation with the intuitive environmental awareness that had made her legendary. "Thermal conditions are stabilizing," whispered Collins, her spotter, whose own equipment had been upgraded with sensors that could detect atmospheric variations invisible to conventional optics. "Wind patterns are showing the spiral formation you identified during training." Sarah nodded silently, recognizing the atmospheric signature that indicated optimal shooting conditions for extreme distances. The morning sun was creating thermal currents that rose from the valleys in predictable patterns, forming invisible corridors through the air that could guide a perfectly timed projectile across distances that defied conventional ballistics. Through her advanced scope, she could see the distant ridge where Alpha 7 had been observed establishing a shooting position. The mysterious sniper's target, a prominent peace negotiator named Dr. Amara Hassan, would be addressing a gathering of regional leaders in exactly 37 minutes. Intelligence indicated that Alpha 7 typically fired approximately 5 minutes before such scheduled events, allowing time to observe the results before disappearing. Sarah began her final preparation sequence, a ritual that combined technical precision with the meditative focus she had developed through years of unconventional training. Her breathing slowed to match the rhythm of the wind patterns, while her consciousness seemed to expand to encompass the entire landscape between her position and the target. The computational systems built into her rifle scope provided real-time analysis of atmospheric conditions, trajectory calculations, and probability assessments. But Sarah had learned to use this technological assistance as enhancement rather than replacement for her intuitive understanding of natural forces. The computer could calculate what should happen. Her job was to feel what would actually happen. "Movement detected at target position," Collins reported quietly. Through his spotting scope, he could see thermal signatures indicating someone was setting up equipment on the distant ridge. "Alpha 7 is in position and appears to be preparing for the shot." Sarah's scope automatically adjusted its magnification and targeting parameters, bringing the distant position into sharp focus despite the enormous distance and atmospheric distortion. For the first time, she could see her mysterious adversary, a figure whose movements suggested professional military training and familiarity with equipment similar to her own advanced system. The technological race between hunter and hunted had been escalating throughout Alpha 7's campaign of terror. Each successful assassination had demonstrated capabilities that pushed further beyond conventional limits, suggesting access to experimental equipment and training that paralleled her own recently acquired skills. Today's confrontation would determine which approach to extreme distance shooting was superior: Alpha 7's systematic precision or Sarah's integration of intuition with technology. "Time to target event, 32 minutes, Collins updated. "All indicators suggest Alpha 7 will fire within the next 7 to 12 minutes based on previous patterns." Sarah made final adjustments to her rifle's position, settling into a firing stance that felt as natural as breathing despite the extraordinary circumstances. The weapon's advanced systems hummed quietly as they continuously updated calculations for factors that changed by the second: wind speed, temperature gradients, humidity variations, and the subtle effects of the Earth's rotation on projectiles traveling such enormous distances. But beyond the technological sophistication, Sarah was employing techniques that couldn't be programmed into any computer system. Her consciousness seemed to merge with the landscape itself, feeling the subtle vibrations of thermal currents, sensing the rhythm of wind patterns that repeated in cycles measured in minutes rather than seconds. She was becoming part of the natural system that would either guide her bullet to its target or deflect it into empty space. Through her scope, she watched Alpha 7 complete preparations for what would be the longest assassination attempt in recorded history. The distance between the mysterious sniper and Dr. Hassan's speaking location was calculated at nearly 8,000 meters, a shot that pushed beyond the theoretical limits of human marksmanship into territory where success seemed to depend more on luck than skill. Thermal bloom detected at target position, Collins reported. Alpha 7 is preparing to fire. Sarah's finger moved to her trigger, but she didn't apply pressure. The timing of her shot would be critical, requiring her to fire at almost the exact moment that Alpha 7's bullet began its journey through the thin mountain air. Her projectile would need to travel 7,200 meters to intercept and neutralize a threat that was simultaneously crossing 8,000 meters of equally challenging terrain. The mathematical improbability of what she was attempting was staggering. Two projectiles fired from different positions, traveling at different velocities through different atmospheric conditions, would need to meet at a precise point in space and time. Conventional ballistics theory suggested that such an interception was impossible, yet Sarah's enhanced training had taught her that impossibility was often just incomplete understanding of natural forces. "I have eyes on Alpha 7's muzzle flash," Collins whispered urgently. "Shot fired. Projectile is airborne." Sarah's world contracted to a single moment of absolute focus. Every sense was attuned to the subtle environmental cues that would determine her shot's trajectory. The thermal current rising from the valley below, the wind shear at different altitudes, the minute variations in air density that could deflect a projectile by meters over such enormous distances. Her rifle fired with a sound that echoed across the mountains like thunder. The muzzle flash illuminated her position for a fraction of a second, but Sarah was already tracking her projectile's path through the advanced optics system that could follow hypersonic objects through atmospheric distortion. Somewhere in the vast space above the Syrian landscape, two bullets were converging on trajectories that would determine whether a peace negotiator lived or died. The flight time for both projectiles was measured in seconds that stretched like hours. Sarah watched through her scope as her bullet followed the thermal corridor she had identified, its path subtly adjusted by atmospheric forces that she had learned to read like a familiar language. Collins maintained visual contact with Alpha 7's position, tracking the hostile projectile through his own advanced optics. "Intercept confirmed," Collins whispered in amazement. Both projectiles collided approximately 4,000 meters downrange. Alpha 7's shot has been neutralized. The impossible had become reality. Two bullets fired from distances beyond conventional marksmanship capability had met in midair, preventing an assassination that would have destabilized an entire region. The technological and intuitive skills that Sarah had developed through months of intensive training had proved sufficient to counter a threat that had seemed unstoppable. But the mission wasn't complete. While Alpha 7's immediate attack had been thwarted, the mysterious sniper remained in position and represented a continuing threat. Sarah's next shot would need to travel the full 7,200 meters to eliminate the source of future attacks against moderate leaders throughout the region. "Target is repositioning," Collins reported. "Alpha 7 appears to be preparing for a secondary shot." Sarah was already adjusting her rifle for the follow-up engagement. The atmospheric conditions had been altered by the passage of the two intercepted projectiles, creating new thermal patterns that required real-time compensation. Her advanced targeting system updated its calculations continuously, but the final shot would depend on her ability to read environmental cues that changed faster than any computer could process. This time, there would be no interception. The shot would need to travel the full distance to its target, crossing terrain and atmospheric conditions that challenged every principle of ballistic science. At 7,200 meters, factors like the Earth's rotation and the minute gravitational variations between different altitudes became significant variables in trajectory calculations. Sarah's breathing synchronized once again with the natural rhythm of the mountain environment. Through her scope, she could see Alpha 7 repositioning for what would likely be a hasty shot at Dr. Hassan's position. The peace negotiator had begun her address to the assembled regional leaders. unaware that her life hung in the balance of a marksmanship duel being fought across impossible distances. Range, 7,200 meters, Sarah whispered to Collins. Wind variable, but following the thermal pattern. Target is mobile but predictable within the shooting position. The scope's computational systems provided probability assessments that hovered around 12% for a successful shot under current conditions. But Sarah had learned to trust capabilities that couldn't be quantified by conventional analysis. The integration of technological assistance with environmental intuition had repeatedly produced results that exceeded mathematical predictions. Target acquired, she confirmed, settling into the final firing sequence. Alpha 7 was clearly visible through her advanced optics, a figure whose skills had terrorized moderate leaders across multiple regions, but who was now exposed to the same extreme distance precision that had made previous assassinations possible. The shot that would end Alpha 7's campaign of terror required perfect timing, environmental awareness, and technological precision working in harmony. Sarah's consciousness expanded once more to encompass the entire shooting environment, feeling the subtle forces that would guide her projectile across 7,200 meters of mountain air. Her finger applied steady pressure to the trigger. The rifle fired with authority, sending its projectile on a journey that would determine whether peace negotiations continued or whether regional conflicts escalated into full-scale warfare. Through her scope, Sarah tracked the bullet's path as it followed the thermal corridor toward its distant target, carrying with it the hopes for stability and the promise that even the most impossible shots could find their mark when skill, technology, and determination converged at the precise moment when they were needed most. The confirmation came 11 seconds later. Alpha 7 had been eliminated, ending a threat that had challenged the fundamental assumptions of modern warfare and personal security. Dr. Hassan completed her address successfully, unaware that her survival had depended on a marksmanship achievement that redefined the possible limits of human capability.